Hello and welcome to the Accelerating Innovation for Climate Technologies, Financing Instruments and Business Models session of GPIC 2021. My name is Andrei Chicherin. I'm the head of Innovation, Technology Transfer and Co-Funding Platforms team of the Private Sector Facility. And I will be the moderator of this session. Our session will try to bring out the key issues, solutions, and panel member experiences that will help us share valuable lessons, and navigate potential ways forward to address challenges of bringing innovation into the climate action projects. We'll talk about business models that work in other similar undertakings, discuss key elements of success and implementation. Also, we will discuss the accredited entities' perspectives on some aspects of technology and innovation climate projects realities, and GCF requirements to obtain financial support for reach potential goals. Live remote interpretation, translation captions, and session records will be available via VOVA platform settings and later also on the event webpage. We hope you will find this session useful and invite you to submit your questions or comments in writing through the Q&A function on VOVA. We will now proceed with the program, and let me begin with a round of brief introductions from the speakers. Dear Amy Komai, please tell us about yourself and your organization.
Hello, my name is Amy Komai, and I'm the Planning and Sales Director at Komai Haltech. Thank you for giving me the opportunity for creating new relationships.
Thank you. Dear Naribin, for the same introduction, the floor is yours.
Thank you, Andrei. So my name is Naribin, and I'm currently managing the StarVenture program, the EBRD's first advisory and mentoring program for tech startups, accelerators, and ecosystem players in the EBRD's countries of operation. Just to give you a bit of background about the EBRD is a multilateral development bank established back in 1991 to support to build market economies in the pre-Soviet Union countries. Now we are operating in over 30 countries from Central and Eastern Europe to Central Asia, including the Northern African region, where we first started the StarVenture program back in 2018. Within the EBRD, my team is called the SME Finance and Development Group, and we are providing both advisory services and financing directly or indirectly through our local partner banks to SMEs. Each year, we are supporting over 300,000 SMEs, and our group is managing about 3.7 billion euros in operating assets. And about the StarVenture program that I'm currently leading, it started as a pilot program and is now one of the bank's flagship programs that are in line with the EBRD's latest strategies, focusing on digitalization, innovation, and recently green economies and climate change. So based on high market demand and our donors' interest, the program is being expanded quite rapidly these days. So I'm very glad to join the session to share more about the StarVenture program today for those who are interested. Thank you.
Thank you, Nari. Dear Rafael, now is your turn.
Thank you, Andrew. It's a pleasure to be here in the Private Investment for Climate Conference and share with you and our fellow panelists. I would like to introduce first Tecnológico de Monterrey. Monterrey Tech is a non-for-profit private university with more than 90,000 students in 26 cities in Mexico. Monterrey Tech is also the top university in Mexico and number 4 in Latin America, and is also number 5 in the entrepreneurship education in the Princeton Review in the United States. I'm currently the director for the Entrepreneurship Network and Ecosystem in the Eugenio Garza Lagüera Entrepreneurship Institute, responsible for the incubation, acceleration, and mentorship programs for entrepreneurs and new ventures from different stages, from idea, inspiration idea to launch to growth. We currently, here at Tech, we run the largest entrepreneurship festival in Latin America, which is called Inc. Monterrey, with more than 10,000 attendees that is coming this November. We also run a very important program with which is with Heineken Mexico, which is called the Heineken Green Challenge, where we have outreach to some 3,000 innovators and entrepreneurs and working directly with more than 150 entrepreneurs. And so far, we have accelerated 40 startups in verticals such as CO2 mitigation, water, circular economy. And this year challenge is currently underway and is on sustainable agriculture. Happy to be here.
Thank you, Rafael. Dear Frederic, please tell us about your affiliation.
Yeah, thank you, Andre. Great to be in this panel today. Yeah, my name is Frederic Wilz. I work for GIZ, Germany's technical cooperation enterprise. We are an enterprise fully owned by the federal government. And we work in all aspects of international cooperation, not only climate, but obviously climate is very important. GIZ has 24,000 staff in about 120 offices all around the world, so it's a really large organization. I myself, I work as a senior project development manager in the unit that is doing business and develops project at GIZ headquarters in Eschborn, close to Frankfurt. And I've been working in the last 2 years on developing a project for incubation and acceleration of climate startups. So yeah, very happy to be here today.
Thank you, Frederic. And finally, Mr. Mitch Carpenter.
Thanks, Andre. I work with the Green Climate Fund. I head up risk compliance and ESS for the fund. Thanks everyone for joining us tonight. This is a very important forum for the GCF. Back to you, Andre.
Dear speakers, thank you for taking part in our panel. The International Energy Agency projects that half of all emission reductions required to reach net zero by 2050 must come from technologies that are currently not yet commercially available. Hence, accelerating innovation for climate technology is critical to achieving the goals of the Paris Agreement. The most logical way to approach this task would be to begin with existing success stories and achievements that can be learned and replicated. And my first set of questions will be to Amy Komai. Amy, Komai Haltech is a mature company that successfully integrates climate technologies into its business model. Can you share your view on the process of innovation within an established company? Who are the main internal and external stakeholders? What defines and drives in-house innovation process? How mature companies can recognize and foster climate innovation to facilitate transition to a low emission and resilient development pathways?
Okay. Thank you. First, so Komai Haltech is a mature company that successfully integrates climate technology innovations into its business model. It's your question. My point of view, if the private sector doesn't innovate, technology and organization will stagnate. As you may already be aware, we are currently facing a decline in the Japanese population, which in turn has resulted in less work in the public sector. At first, we tried to sell existing steel technology overseas, but the market is highly competitive and it was difficult for our company to get new contract because we haven't done any project overseas for the last 30 years. We used all our engineers' knowledge in wind to develop our 300 kilowatt mid-sized wind turbine. We were able to make contracts with countries with similar climate and terrain conditions to Japan, like, for example, Mexico and the Philippines. The success and reliability of our wind turbines led to overseas steel bridge projects. As long as we don't stop innovating and pushing boundaries, we will continue to achieve further successful results. And second question, who are the main internal and external stakeholders. I think about when we try to develop new technologies, we consult government institutes, universities, and other establishments for strategic knowledge and solutions to potential problems. At the same time, we make requests for subsidies from organizations in Japan, such as NEDO, the New Energy and Industrial Technology Development Organization, and GPIC, the Global Environment Center Foundation. Sometimes our proposals are accepted, but sometimes our proposals are rejected. We believe that proposing as many ideas as possible can result in better and more focused technology. This, in turn, can help reduce expenditure and can benefit future business models based on renewable energy used as a main source of power within a company and factory. And last question, our original business in the manufacturing and installation of steel bridges aims to make transportation more convenient for local residents. Our area of expertise is in local production for local energy consumption. We have installed a prototype wind turbine for the purpose of energy production and consumption in our own factory. Not only has this proven that our new technology is very capable, but it also reiterates the importance of how renewable energy is a valuable resource in assisting in powering a company and factory. It's my opinion. Thank you.
Thank you, Amy Kamai. My next few questions will be to Naribin. EBRD Star Venture Program is one of the flagship initiatives that facilitate technology and innovation with EBRD support. Could you please share some backgrounds of the program? What are the key outcomes and some of the best practices that can be relevant and replicated in developing countries?
Thank you, Andre. To address your questions, I prepared some slides, so I'll share my slides now. So to give you some more information about the Star Venture Program, so this is a diagram that how we created Star Venture from the beginning. So if you look at the bottom of the diagram, we are currently targeting to support local accelerators and their cohort startups and high potential startups that we call HIPSUs. So together with the equity funds team, which is a separate team within the EBRD, we started the Star Venture Program to provide both financing and advisory so that the EBRD can maximize the support for the growth of startups and ecosystems in our countries of operation. In terms of the overview of the program, we are currently operating in 11 countries. Recently, Turkey has been added. And from next year, we are operating in some EU countries, including Bulgaria, Romania, Greece, and so on. Specifically for the Star Venture Program, we've recruited more than 1,500 mentors and advisors from Silicon Valley, Europe, and Asia, and so on. And these are the experts that can support our startups in various different business areas. For our support for local accelerators, we have 13 partner accelerators in 2 different regions. So we provide advisory and capacity building activities. And for our HIPSUs, we have now about 90 HIPSUs, and most of them, they are currently actually being recruited. So our previous HIPSUs have raised over $110 million during the recent 2 years. And among those HIPSUs, we identified 33% of them are green. So far through the program, we've supported over 250 startups through customized one-on-one advisory projects, trainings, workshops, and mentor matching and so on. In terms of the Star Venture model, if you look at the bottom of the pyramid, we do ecosystem capacity building activities. So for instance, we do roundtables, discussions with governments and ecosystem players. We provide some policy level advisory that we are trying to pilot for Egypt. We do corporate venture capital capacity building activities, which is very interesting because we are trying to help our corporates in our countries of operation to do CVC to increase the access to finance for startups that we are supporting. We also support crowdfunding, and we have this Startup Innovation Challenge, which is the global sort of a competition open to the EBRD's operation countries that we are recruiting HIPSUs for Star Venture. And we are also supporting local consultants to work with startups. So we provide boot camps and diagnostics trainings, and we support accelerators for their capacity building. And if you look at the red box here, which is scaling support, this is the main component of the Star Venture program. So we select these HIPSUs through our own selection, together with equity funds team, regional funds, and sometimes together with the ICT banking team. So after we select HIPSUs, we provide a package program that contains this business diagnostics, which we developed specifically for the Star Venture program together with the University of Cambridge. And we provide one-on-one customized advisory, which is a technical assistance based on our company's needs. And we provide mentoring, we provide business matching, and we also help our startups to get more access to finance through CVCs, VCs, angel investors, and so on. So the idea is to really nurture the stars from the regions so that they can inspire some of other young startups in the region. And ultimately, that's in line with the EBRD's mandate. And regarding the outcome of the program, when HIPSUs first joined the program, this is only for HIPSUs in Egypt and Jordan, where we first started the program, their annual turnover was about 244K, and their employee number was on average about 13. And after 2 years, we noticed a huge growth in these HIPSUs. So for instance, a turnover growth has been 3,596%, and about 1,900 new jobs were created. And employment growth is about 746%, including women employment growth. And 90% of our startups among HIPSUs have shown positive turnover. So this has been a very good outcome of the program so far. And because our HIPSUs are pretty visible on local media or global media because of their technologies and because of their innovative solutions and fundraising, we have lots of visibility like this. So this is actually a good news for the program. And just to give you some information about some of our green startups. So we have two very good cases. One is Tagadot, which is an Egyptian company. So in Egypt, a lot of cooking oils are being used based on their sort of diet. And what Tagadot is doing is to collect used cooking oils from households and retailer businesses so that they can recycle these oils. So during the pandemic, they actually made hand sanitizers using a different formula out of these cooking oils. So this is definitely in line with the sustainability, the theme that we are very much supporting throughout the program. And another example is Next Protein based in Tunisia. So what they do is they provide proteins out of bugs. And when they feed these bugs, they use inconsumable food. So they recycle those food that we cannot eat. And then out of those proteins, they create this animal food to feed these animal stocks. So this is definitely very much in line with this sustainable economy and very much green. So we're very proud to support these companies. And in terms of Next Protein, this is a company that has raised the largest seed funding ever happened in Tunisia, which was $11 million. So the company is growing, and their methodology has been approved by the EU. So we are very much looking forward to seeing the growth of these companies. And if you are interested in more about the StarVenture program, please visit our website, which is here. Thank you.
Thank you, Nari. And I heard in your activities, you plan to focus even more on mitigation and adaptation projects from next year. What will be your main selection criteria to include new companies focusing on climate projects in your program?
Yeah, thank you, Andre, for the question, because that's definitely very much sort of connected to our plan in the near future, because our focus on climate change from next year, I mean, this is a huge sort of direction that we are taking. And this is in alignment with the EBRD's commitment to make climate finance a key measure of the bank's performance. And we are very much committed to ensuring that by 2025, the majority of our business volume should be green, which is, full alignment with the Paris Agreement. So it is very important for the StarVenture program to select and support more green startups. And some of the criteria and indicators that we are currently considering are mainly 3 different aspects. So those will be climate change mitigation, climate change adaptation and resilience, and environmental protection. So, for example, if we select companies that are working on greenhouse gas, reduction, renewable energy, materials, waste efficiency, saving water, pollution reduction, and so on, then I think that will be the sort of the new theme of the program that we can have focus on. And also considering the 33% of our HIPSUs are already green, we are seeing this prospect very positively, and our donors is increasingly interested in supporting more green startups. So we are very much looking to identifying and supporting these green startups in our countries of operation.
Thank you, Narabin. As we see from Kamai Tech and EBRD StarVenture, embedding new technologies into the climate action has tangible examples of successful pathways in developed countries. In some cases, incubators and accelerators infrastructure plays critical role in catalyzing private initiative into innovation. And it seems that this approach brings result in developing countries as well. I want to address my next question to Rafael Lorenzo Pignon. Tec de Monterrey is part of the top schools for entrepreneurship. Based on your experience, to what extent incubator and accelerator infrastructure can be relevant for the support of early stage climate mitigation and adaptation projects? How do you approach success failure measurement? What are the key performance indicators in your managerial approach to the portfolio of supported startups?
Yeah, thank you, Andrew. I think that's a very important and crucial question to understand that. And the short answer is yes, definitely infrastructure for an incubator accelerator with a focus on ecosystem development. It's crucial for supporting climate mitigation and adaptation projects. And I'm going to explain myself a little bit more. Climate initiatives do not have a developed or strong support ecosystem in developing economies like in Mexico or in Latin America. But I mean investors, dedicated climate-specific programs, or specific communities that not only inspire innovators and researchers or entrepreneurs, but also that can have a link with other players and stakeholders like the government or international organizations or even corporations. So as you can see in Mexico and Latin America, is not well developed, has other startup sectors or verticals, such as fintech, or e-commerce, that in the last year has been an explosion of startups in Mexico and Brazil, for example, in fintech, or even education, edtech education has been the focus of recent, especially because before the pandemic and because of the pandemic, it's the focus of major investments and in digital tech in general. Nowadays, we talk about this Latin America as the next tech frontier, or the Mexican startup bonanza, has portrayed, if you probably read the recent articles in the Financial Times and The Economist that mentioned this information. Just to mention, just in Mexico, we have 5 new unicorns, mainly in fintech. And this year, tech firms have raised some $3 billion, which is almost the same amount than the previous 9 years combined. So you can see that it's a strong growth now in the Mexico and Latin American ecosystem. But let me take you back 9 years ago to explain the importance of the incubator and accelerator infrastructure. 9 years ago, 2010, practically there was none of this, what we are talking about now. VC, venture capital, was embryonic. At least 3 or 4 VC firms were trying heroically, trying to invest in seed, pre-seed, at the time, pre-seed and seed $50,000, not the seed tickets that we see now. And then from that, we have a new generation of incubation and acceleration programs. In the previous years, in the previous decade, for instance, the Mexican government supported a lot of supported the development of a network of business incubators, accelerators, but they were more focused on traditional business or SMEs, small and medium-sized enterprises. But this new generation of incubation and acceleration programs were inspired mainly by what was happening in Silicon Valley, right? And then we have a strong exchange with them. And we're starting to develop this from previous effort by the government and the traditional SME focus. So we're starting to develop more high impact, high value projects and initiatives. At that time, the incubation and acceleration infrastructure that we're developing was crucial for the different stages in startup development. I will explain in the first stage, which we call exploration and community building, you want to call it, then the incubation of ideas and technologies, and the acceleration of early stage, mostly pre-revenue or pre-customer startups. From this embryonic infrastructure, we have the first generation of startups, entrepreneurs, and investors. It was the first wave of these modern technology-focused entrepreneurs and investors. And later, we saw the arrival of new incubation and acceleration programs, such as sort of tech lean programs. We move as well from traditional business incubation programs and processes to more like using new approaches to experimentation, validation, and so on. Other programs like 500 startups from Silicon Valley, or Mass Challenge from Boston, Seed Stars, for instance, from Europe, and the development and growth of the VC industry in Mexico. Of course, at some point, the Mexican government supported and incentivized the arrival of new VC firms. Nowadays, it's normal for Latin American entrepreneur to go to Y Combinator, the top accelerator in the world, where startups such as MBIB, Dropbox, or rapidly Latin America have been. Recently, we can see in the last 2 years, we have seen the arrival of international investors such as SoftBank in Latin America, but also the arrival of corporations interested in what is happening in different verticals. Of course, the first one were banks trying and then looking for opportunities in the fintech area. So definitely incubation and acceleration infrastructure is relevant for entrepreneurs and startups. Infrastructure helps innovators and founders to access resources such as funding, talent, relationships, mentors, markets to develop, launch, and grow their initiatives. This infrastructure also helps to develop mindsets and skills and communities, so important in the first stages of new initiatives. This infrastructure has to have must have an ecosystem approach, a link to investors. That's definitely. For many years, we have incubation and acceleration programs not necessarily linked to some kind of funding, or perhaps some kind of traditional finance mechanism, but they were not working. So we need to have strong links to the investor, VC, angels, investors, and even programs from the government like grants and other incentives like that. This is clear for early stage. This is clear for early stage climate mitigation and adaptation startup initiatives. And in this sense, incubation and acceleration infrastructure will be critical for this. and to access to funding is crucial. Grants, venture capital, patient investment, and corporations as well. Corporations, we have seen, like I mentioned in the beginning when I was introducing myself and tech, that we have the Heineken Green Challenge. Now corporations are approaching these verticals, not only climate change, but sustainable development goals in general. And they do it through trying to innovate in their business models, offering products and services and value propositions that take into account this, but also because of the corporate environmental and social and governance initiatives, and also because philanthropic interest on that. And we have seen that they have ranging from social impact, sustainable impact to climate change. This infrastructure will also help to develop the assessment tools we need to measure the impact in mitigation and adaptation. That we see, it's these tools are still in the emerging area, growing, and how can we measure this impact not only from companies but also from startup and innovation initiatives. Even some venture capitalists and firms in the US have developed their own tools to do this. In this sense, I think that the infrastructure, this infrastructure is embryonic in Mexico and Latin America. Globally, we've already seen first way back in 2006 and 2011, the first wave of clean tech funded startups that didn't know, many of them, very few got into the growth and so on. But we need to accelerate the development of this infrastructure and ecosystem to capitalize on the learnings of the Latin and Mexican startup ecosystem at large, and seize these opportunities that are arising and the challenges we have for the next 10 or 20 years. So we have seen definitely, we have also seen a recent interest in science-based startups, perhaps because of the need to develop a vaccine that quick. Now we're more aware of doing that, and we are sure that many of the new proposals, new business models, and new innovations will come from the science-based for sure, and not only digital startup, but science-based startups. So this is so the answer is definitely we need to address this. We need to accelerate this infrastructure, and then tackle the opportunities that we have before us.
Thank you, Rafael. Dear members of the audience, many of you have already submitted your written questions through the registration form. And we invite all of you to continue sending your questions or comments through the rest of the session by using the Q&A function of Wova application. Meanwhile, let's talk about innovations from another perspective. We all know that the cornerstone of GCF business model is cooperation with accredited entities who design, define, and implement funding proposals supported by GCF. My next questions for the accredited entity representative, Frederick Wills. We know that GIZ is actively considering incubator accelerator support to achieve mitigation and adaptation impacts in developing countries. How do you approach the link between financial support of early stage companies and the mitigation and adaptation impacts that may be achieved if the startups grow successfully? What are the methodological tools you are using in the GIZ climate projects? Frederick?
Yeah, thank you, Andre, for these questions, for these tough questions. So, yeah, as you mentioned, GIZ is currently designing a project to support startups and young ventures with innovative climate solutions, in fact, in 2 regions in Latin America and West Africa. And I'm very happy that actually Tec de Monterrey and Rafael is one of our partners. And I got again very excited listening to him and his statements. So very happy that he's with us today. So this program we are currently designing, while it focuses on mitigation solutions, we're also looking for solutions with high adaptation goal benefits. I mean, so very briefly, I mean, along with training, coaching, mentoring, these 2 regional programs, and right now we call them actually climate innovation hubs, they will provide some good amounts of money, 20K pre-seed grants for really early founders in the incubation stage, and larger amounts of money, 120K repayable seed grants for ventures which take part in the acceleration program. So if you were a non-climate accelerator or venture building program, you would pay special attention actually to the founders and the teams when they are applying, because at this early stage, what really matters is actually the individual or the individuals behind the idea or prototype product. But as in our two programs, in these two regional programs, we are targeting startups and entrepreneurs, which shall be promising both in terms of growth, scalability, and climate impact. So we actually also need to carefully assess the climate impact potential of these startups when they're applying to the program. And this is really a special challenge. So for us at the very beginning, when we started developing this project, we asked ourselves, how can we measure a potential impact of an idea which is presented to us by 2-3 founders? How can we measure this as precisely as possible, and get a feeling for the mitigation impact, but also for the adaptation co-benefits? So fortunately, when we started this project development, we found a handful of tools which have emerged in the last 2 to 3 years. Most of them are still kind of a beta version, but there are some tools, and Raphael also mentioned one which has been developed in the US. So of these few tools that exist, you can actually group them in kind of 2 clusters, because there are 2 generic approaches for measuring climate impact potential of a startup. So you can apply a top-down approach, which really looks at kind of the grand strategic impact potential. You do this not so much by focusing actually on the product that the team is pitching to you, but more like on the technology they're trying to use, that they will use, and the total avoidable emissions in the relevant sector they are targeting. So this is a great approach if you are, let's say, you're an impact investor, an impact VC who needs to decide between 2 startup teams from different industries and sectors. You like both products, you like both teams, but you don't actually know which startup would have the bigger climate impact potential if you would compare the 2 technologies. So for the Startup Accelerator program we are currently designing, we need also a tool which is not just helping us at the gate of the program, but also allows the startup itself during the program and the coaches and domain experts to really understand the product mechanics and develop it. So this is the reason why we went for a bottom-up type assessment and found a tool which follows the principle of a life cycle assessment, LCA. And the tool we chose, which is pretty straightforward, called Climate Impact Forecast Tool, initially developed by a Dutch consulting firm, allows to quantify the impact potential of a very concrete product, especially for the next 5 years. After this, there are more uncertainties, but the next 5 years, it's doing a great job. And it also helps to understand, which parts of a product or service, which components could be improved. So we were very happy to found this tool, but as Andre mentioned it, as we all know, in order to get funding from the GCF, we also need to make a statement about the climate impact potential of the whole project. So in our case, of a portfolio, and in fact 2 portfolios of startups. And the biggest challenge here is actually that the exact composition of these portfolios is not even known at the time of the estimate, because obviously we don't know which startups will apply and which will be selected in the program we are proposing to the GCF. So again, we looked for a tool, and in this case, we didn't find one. So together with our strategic partner, the EU Climate Knowledge and Innovation Community, we approached this firm in the Netherlands, which is managing this climate impact forecast tool, and asked them to develop a model at the portfolio level. And I don't go into details, it's quite complicated. We'll publish soon a report, but I can say they did a really nice job. They kind of modeled a fictional but realistic regional portfolio of startups. And this portfolio consists of startup archetypes, which represent the different relevant GCF mitigation results areas. And then these archetypes were customized, the features of these archetypes were customized to the 2 regional environments, Latin America and Sub-Saharan Africa. So to finish, I mean, the current model is focusing on GHG emission reduction, so it does not yet recognize adaptation co-benefits at the portfolio level. We're working on this. Yeah, and maybe a year from now, I can share the experiences in modeling the adaptation co-benefits in this conference. Thank you, Andre.
Thank you, Frederic. That's really interesting. Let's now talk about Green Climate Fund and its perspective in supporting innovation and climate projects. Dear Mitch, in traditional venture business model, risk and reward go hand in hand. What are the specifics of GCF approach to this balance? How potential innovation and technology entrepreneurs seeking access to GCF support should position themselves to align their development strategy with GCF goals and priorities?
Thank you, Andre. I prepared a couple of slides just to answer that question. As Raphael mentioned, there's been significant flow of funds into VCs, particularly dealing with climate tech startups. Here we could see pre-Paris Accord, which is basically a flat line, and post-Paris Accord, which has exponential growth. So risk appetite is definitely back in the climate tech space, and that's a good outcome for us at the fund and society as a whole. There are some other details to be had here. We look at the deal size increasing because the number of deals are going down, but the flow of funds is still rising. So that means the average deal size are getting bigger. So the appetite from institutions are there. However, if we look at the 2018 to 2020, we know there's a little bit of a risk aversion going on there, where people are more likely to stay in the late stage investing rather than the early stage investing. So that's that's a barrier that has to be overcome. So the fund, this fits nicely with the fund's mandate to support low emission and climate resilient development pathways, and of course the fund has a strong risk appetite to do so. Now there's some barriers to overcome, and they're generally around either perceived or actual unfavorable risk reward profiles, and also a lack of patient capital, for which the previous slide evidenced. The GCF is, of course, in the business of transformational climate impact action. So that means we have the mandate. Private side certainly could benefit from this engagement with the GCF, certainly on the return side. They usually have an ESG mandate they could easily participate in, and also portfolio diversification and new markets could be ahead for private side involvement. Now, specifically on the risk side, our risk is stated from top down. Basically, in our strategy, we have a risk appetite, which allows us to unblock these barriers and increase or improve the value chain to allow technology innovation to happen and diffusion and transfer that's much needed, especially in a developing country setting. And of course, those should be focused on LDC, SIDS, and African state. Our investment criteria, which each and every investment comes into the fund, needs to be adhered to. And I'm happy to report that they do include features or attributes that are around paradigm shifting and sustainable development, and specifically technology and business innovation. So they're all it's all there for us to utilize. The risk management framework also goes into detail as to what type of risk will be assessed with each and every one of these transactions that are presented to the fund. The risk could emanate from macro level to lack of liquidity, low uncertain financials. Those are all certainly barriers that the fund could overcome in order to achieve impact or sustainable co-benefits also along the SDGs. It would be much appreciated, especially in this COVID-19 environment that we operate in. Arguably, the co-benefits are just as important as the climate impact. And of course, financial returns are a key feature that we allow for within our investments. Now, specifically from a risk management standpoint, The fund has to have abilities and demonstrate that via technical institutional capacity. They need to set up eligibility criteria to give our board some idea what type of investments will be undertaken with the money. So those are not unusual demands for an investor. They need to be able to identify, mitigate risks that come about from these investments, and certainly monitor performance and provide the GCF with regular updates. We also have social, environmental, and social standards, which need to be adhered to. And of course, anything that could benefit the developing country and no objection letter from the country itself. It's a very good engagement for the investment when you approach the GCF. So, the tech entrepreneurs could definitely benefit from the GCF support. Just need to familiarize yourself with our investment and risk frameworks. And of course, if you need support, there's project preparation facilities, which tend to be grant-based to help funding proposals evolve properly to meet and to tackle a large-scale financing in the global MDBs and financial mechanism. So the fund could deploy many financial instruments based on the needs. Part of the capital structure could be equity, all the way up to loan, depending on the investment that's needed at the time. Of course, we're cognizant that we don't want to build concentration in one particular technology and develop moral hazards in our business, but we do measure and look at concentrations that way. So innovative business model participation, anchor investment in funds are all positions we take. If you look at the example with the PCA Global Fund, the Global Coral Reef Fund, they're scaling up of adaptation projects, finance and accelerate the development and transfer of private site technology into developing country. And that's through a private equity fund piece, Pegasus Capital. So as you know, private side and adaptation, it's not a natural match. It's very difficult to find investments into adaptation with the private side engagement. The other, and that's $100 million investment, so it's not an insignificant amount. It is at scale. The other investment with the PCA, you will see there is an anchor, 125 million anchor investor, focusing on blue economy investing via a PE platform that overcomes barrier that there's no private side financing available. And of course, to protect the coral reefs via activities like sustainable ocean production, ecotourism, and so forth. So recent trends are good for risk appetite coming back to climate tech investments. The challenge, of course, remain, as I illustrate with the chart in the first page. There seems to be insignificant or insufficient investment at early stages, and possibly a lack of patient capital and technology capacity. The GCF has the high risk appetite and can employ various financial instruments to help catalyze innovation, so forth. And we look forward to working with you. Thank you.
Thank you, Mitch. I see some questions come to us from the session audience, so let me forward some of them to the panel members. And my first, first question will be to Frederick. How can GCF develop private sector partnerships to better support local innovations and technology transfer?
Yeah, thank you for that question. I probably could spend now an hour on sharing ideas about this. I mean, when I shared some features of the program we're developing, maybe something which you were missing, the person who asked the question, was more like the kind of the overall ecosystem building. I think this is what Naribin, what the EBRD Star Venture program is doing, so the ecosystem capacity building. So this is obviously equally important as providing this kind of very key initial financial support and training. You also need to have an environment which is favorable for PhD students who really want to do something about the climate problem and then come up with good ideas. There needs to be obviously also on the policy side, policy conditions, regulations need to change to make this more attractive. So there are a lot of partnerships that you need to have in place, and we are working in this project with the private sector facility. So I think we're very happy that they are happy to go into this very risky area of really early stage venture building. There's also a lot of uncertainty. We are very happy the fund is willing to do this. But then there's obviously, that's also what Schmidt, I think, mentioned, the need then to fuel these VCs, these impact VCs, which are ready to go and invest into these in these startups. And also our research showed that, yes, there's now a lot of momentum in the VC community. The COP is coming and so on. But if you actually ask a lot of VCs, how do you measure climate impact? There's a lot of let's say polite. There are a lot of kind of polite statements. It's a very difficult business, and if you're really serious about making the best choices where you invest in terms of the climate impact, you need to really go into the nitty-gritties of the startups, of the ventures, of the products. So we hope, obviously, we're developing a pipeline of startups, and we hope in the future that GCF will invest in other vehicles which then actually provide the necessary Series A and Series B funding for these innovations.
Thank you. Question for Nari. What is the selection criteria for onboarding high potential startups within EBRD's STAR Venture program?
Yeah, that's a very good question. So we are targeting post-accelerator stage companies as HIPSUs. So those companies are not very, very early stage at the idea sort of generation stage. Most of them are already producing revenue. But then we have this, quite loose kind of limit up to €1 million per year. That's because it's kind of overlapping with our existing support for SMEs, which is a very big program that we have within our group. But nevertheless, we see a lot of big, significant growth in these HIPSUs. So for instance, there is an Egyptian company called Trella, which is the logistics sort of freight company, but it's like an Uber. So they are very, in line with this sustainability and so on. But at the same time, their growth has been significant. So when they first joined the StarVenture, their employee number was only less than like 15, but then now they have more than 300 people. So we see a lot of like big exponential growth in these startups. So we don't see this turnover as a like a kind of strict sort of line. But nevertheless, when they first joined the StarVenture, we see the turnover. But the sweet spot line that we actually target is definitely those companies that raised funding, the seed funding up to 8 million. And then maybe the valuation of up to sort of 80 million. So it's up to, so it could vary. But definitely the criteria, they have to sort of be originated from the countries of operations where, the EBRD is supporting. And then their sort of major executives should be also from the countries of operations. But for instance, criteria, we are trying to make it quite flexible. So for instance, many of these tech startups, because of investors, they actually are registered outside of the EBRD's countries of operation. So many of them are, for instance, sort of registered under the Netherlands and the British and so on. But then their operation per se are actually inside within the countries of operation that EBRD is supporting. So we are seeing how these companies can impact our economies rather than sort of the having the strict criteria. But overall, yes, Star Venture program, because it's a pilot program, we are actually trying to learn to sort of adjust to the market demands.
Thank you, Nari. And another question for Mitch. You mentioned several adaptation projects, and in practice, many private sector entrepreneurs are struggling to support long-term adaptation climate projects. In your experience, what are the example of technologies that can be mentioned as success stories where private capital supported them in the domain of adaptation climate activities?
Thanks, Andrea. That's an excellent question. I can give you an example from our investment in our Pegasus Capital. The one with 125 million anchor investor that had sustainable infrastructure, waste management, ecotourism. We also had technology transfer along agricultural analytics, water harvesting, irrigation, food systems, geospatial mapping, imaging, catastrophe, risk modeling, supply chain analytics, and so forth. Anything resilient would qualify for adaptation financing. Over, Andre.
Thank you, Mitch. I think that our panel was quite informative and thought-provoking session where we covered important topic of support for innovation and climate-related projects. From our discussions, we can see that thriving innovation culture can be successfully fostered by dedicated leadership in mature companies and integrated into climate action with grassroots support infrastructure. Evidence from existing incubators and accelerators proves that this is a valid business model that Green Climate Fund and accredited entities should consider and support as an institutionalized answer to the challenges and risks faced by innovation actors in developing countries. With that, we're coming to the end of this session, and I would like to thank once again the panel speakers, the organizing team at the GCF, and the interpreters who supported us today, as well as members of the audience for your interest and active participation. Stay safe and goodbye.